Hello, 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 everybody. It's Monday. Now you're riding with the Road Crew. This is the Road to Liberty podcast on the Think Liberty Network. How are you doing, everybody? Are you doing well? Are you being safe? I hope you are. Coronavirus is on the rise. It's what's in the news these days, but we're not here to talk about that tonight. If you want to hear our takes on coronavirus and all that fun nonsense going on, remember you can tune in tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central when we have the Token and Hobbs show. But tonight we have a special guest. She's a former state senator in the state of Nebraska, a registered libertarian, and she's the new chair of the Libertarian Pragmatist Caucus. Please welcome to the show, everybody, Laura Ebke. How you doing, Laura?
I'm doing well. How are you tonight?
I am doing awesome. I'm doing as awesome as one can be in these trying times. I hope you're being safe.
We are trying to be safe. I am hunkered down in my home bunker. So
Awesome. So, well, I wanted to get you on the show to talk about your new position as head of the Libertarian Pragmatist Caucus, how you think the state of the party is, and what do you think the Pragmatist Caucus should be doing in the party, and what direction you'd like to steer it into. But before we get into that, you work at a local think tank in Nebraska, the Platte Institute. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing there?
Sure. Well, the right after the last election in 2018, right after I was getting ready to leave office, I got a call from the Platte Institute, and I had passed LB 299 in Nebraska, which was our Occupational Board Reform Act, and it got a lot of national attention. The Platte Institute asked me if I would be interested in coming and working with them as their senior fellow for job licensing. And the timing was right, and the opportunity was great, and this was an area that I thought would be really a good one for a libertarian to work in, because it's something that libertarians, have talked about for a long time, about reducing red tape and reducing licensing, letting people work. And so I've been working with the Platte Institute for a little over a year now. Did a lot of traveling last year. Was supposed to do some traveling early this year, but it hasn't worked out. I get to go around the country and talk to folks about what we're doing with job licensing in Nebraska. Platte Institute recently got a very nice grant to engage in a multi-state effort. And so we're working with think tanks, policy think tanks in a lot of different states, in Iowa and South Dakota and West Virginia and New York and a few others, and trying to help them to build the capacity so that they can accomplish some of the things like we did here in Nebraska.
Yeah, and you have some experience when it comes to reducing red tape in Nebraska. You helped pass a landmark licensure law here. What don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, LB 299 was that was it got a lot of attention from the Wall Street Journal and other very pro-market types of organizations. Worked with the Institute for Justice in order to get that accomplished, but also the Platte Institute and the ACLU of Nebraska. So we brought together sort of a unique combination of folks who wanted to see more liberty in the workplace, more opportunity. And the goal of the Occupational Board Reform Act, which is what it's called, was to require all licenses to be reviewed on a regular basis. And you might remember that a few years ago we got rid of the so-called horse massage license. And the horse massage license was in place, even though we had no people who were actually licensed under the horse massage license. It goes back to like the 1980s, where some veterinarians got upset, as I understand it, because it's turf wars. So the veterinarians got upset because some chiropractors decided to try to adjust some horses' backs or something, through massage. And the veterinarians said, no, you can't touch animals, right? And so they created this horse massage license that was supervised by the veterinary board, and could say who was allowed to conduct horse massage. Well, obviously the chiropractors got out of that because they've got their own licensing board and decided they weren't going to fight the vets. But in the meantime, a lot of states started creating actual horse massage certificates. And so somebody who had been out of state, Colorado or someplace like that, came to Nebraska, didn't know that we required a license, and started doing, selling her skills doing horse massage. And a local vet got upset. She took it to her senator because she was given a cease and desist and a threat of like a $50,000 fine. It was crazy. For practicing without a license. Yeah. So
50K.
it was a lot of money. Yeah. And so what happened was that she ended up going to Senator Groney, who was her state senator. He brought this bill. Got a lot of people kind of giggled about it, the whole idea of a horse massage. But in the end, we got rid of the license. The idea behind the Occupational Board Reform Act is really just this: that if you review the licenses regularly, maybe somebody will trigger and say, wait a second, why do we have this license? Why is it necessary? And I think that probably the horse massage license is one of those that if we'd known that it even existed, most people didn't, but if we'd even known that it existed, that somewhere along the line somebody would have said, well, that's stupid, and we would have gotten rid of it.
Yeah, and this really shows what the true nature behind licensure laws really is. Because most people have the assumption if licensure laws exist, it exists to protect consumers, right? To protect me, to protect you from people who are just willingly doing whatever they want and not adhering to any set standards or practices. But as your story just illustrated, a lot of the time licensure laws don't exist to protect consumers at all. They exist instead to protect the individuals who are already in that field and want to limit competition so that they don't have to actually compete with people for your business. It's an anti-consumer law, not a pro-consumer one.
Very much, and it's very oftentimes it's all about turf wars. It's all about protectionist policies to determine who can and can't get into the occupation, to control the number of people that can come into the occupation. We recently had a bill introduced. Senator LaGrone introduced it for us. Would have been a universal recognition bill. And that would be sort of like what Arizona did last year, which would basically say, hey, if you're licensed to do X as an electrician or whatever, if you're licensed to do this, we're going to go ahead and license you in Nebraska if you don't have any negative history. If we have a license and we require a license and you're already licensed someplace else, we'll recognize it. But boy, when we brought that, people complained about that even because they want to, they try to say, well, our license is better, and my argument is our license is not necessarily better, and I don't know why in the world we would ever think that an electrician in Nebraska or a hairdresser in Nebraska is inherently better than one in Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, or any place else, just because we supposedly have higher standards in terms of education. Experience is worth something.
Yeah. Okay, so let's change gears and talk about your new position as chair of the Pragmatist Caucus.
Sure.
Why did you decide that this is a position that you wanted to have?
Well, I mean, I think that I have a certain sense of kinship with a lot of the folks in the Pragmatist Caucus. These are people who want to get something done. And they come from, if you look at them philosophically, I think you would find that the pragmatists come from all walks of the Libertarian Party. They come from, the Mises Caucus. They come from the more radical caucus. But what you also find is that they actually want to, they have a different approach. And this is not to say at all that any of those other caucuses are better or worse. But I think that you have philosophies out there that aren't necessarily being used in the most productive way for the party. And so the Pragmatist Caucus, what we want to do is find ways to grow the party and elect people. And we're not always going to agree. You know, you and I won't always agree. We've probably had some disagreements in the past, philosophically. Not too many, but you know, probably a few. And there's others.
There's never been two libertarians in a room that agreed on everything.
Exactly, and that's what we all have to recognize is that there. You know, I'm not a big fan of the one true libertarian because
well, I mean that would be me.
Yeah, well, I thought it was me, you know. So,
no, it's me.
but see, therein lies the problem. And so, let's just say that we can all we can all agree that we want to move in the direction of more liberty. We want to instead of bigger government, we want smaller government. Instead of less liberty, we want more liberty, and let's face in that direction and move in that direction, and work together to elect candidates to to grow the party until we can't anymore. And I don't know when that point is going to be, but I think we're a long ways from that before those who believe in more liberty are going to start disagreeing about fundamental direction.
I mean, yeah, this is a party that's been around since the 1970s, and we're just now getting over 1% in presidential votes. Yeah. So this is a long road that we're on right now. It's right. We're not going to be successful overnight. So how did you decide? Did you put your name in the hat to run for this position, or did someone come up to you and say, "Hey, you'd be great for this position. You should run for it"?
It was more that. I think what really happened there. I'm the chairman of the board, chair of the board. We have an executive director who's the former chair, and the way that they left it with me was that. That they thought that I should be the new board chair because I brought a level of I don't know, a level of credibility maybe, and I tend to have a more moderate approach to things than some, and so I agreed. I believed in their mission to begin with. I think I've joined several of the caucuses that have membership dues, but that was the first one that I joined, and so I have been pleased to be a member of the Pragmatist Caucus for a while, and I've just always been. I'm very impressed with the level of leadership that they already have there, and so I was pleased to join the team.
So Carl wants to know who you think is the most pragmatic libertarian candidate running for president right now.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I'd have to see the whole list again. Because
we'd be here all day if we had to go through every single name on the list.
The list changes, and I hate to mention any names because I like a lot of them. I like a lot of the candidates. Some would be better candidates for president than others from sort of a pragmatist approach. But I like candidates who are working towards, towards building the party. I think that as much as I love some of our candidates, I think that they aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily have a great chance of actually being president. In fact, I think probably no one's going to be president. No libertarian is going to be president.
Ooh, hot take right there.
Yeah, come next year. And so I think somebody who can, I've told people for a long time that my goal is that whoever's the presidential candidate should not embarrass us and can articulate our philosophy well and clearly, but also that they ought not they ought not burn bridges, that there ought not be a war between the different elements of libertarians. I'm a political scientist, and political parties are the most successful when they recognize that that sort of 80% rule, that people who identify as libertarians or Republicans or Democrats or whatever, that they're more likely to get something done when they say, okay, we don't have to agree on every single thing. Rather, what we're going to do is we're going to, we're going to work together until we can't. And that's always been my philosophy.
And then kind of the thing that I've always wanted from our candidates, be there presidential or chair or vice chair. I want somebody who's not going to make the job of the on the ground volunteers more difficult.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I had this little experience running for reelection to the legislature in 2018, which I lost. But I think I developed an understanding of just how easy it is. People don't remember much about the libertarians except the things that they see as negative things about the libertarians. And so, I want us to increase our level of professionalism. I want us to, look like a party that people can take seriously, and take seriously all the time, not just some of the time.
Now, so if you could craft a perfect libertarian presidential candidate, what might they look like?
Well, I mean, ideally, I'd like to see a presidential candidate, and Trump really messed this up for us, right? But I mean, I'd like to see
He's messed
somebody.
up with quite a few things.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd like to see some experience in governance. Okay, somebody who's been elected to something. Now, I recognize that as libertarians, we don't have a real deep bench that way. But it's nice to see that if you can't win your local school board, why do you think that you can win the presidency? And so, I like to see somebody who's actually had to go out and talk to people, and not just other libertarians, but rather talk to, people who may not agree with them, and to develop a little bit of an understanding of things, and what people are thinking that way. Certainly you want somebody who is able to articulate the message, but you want them to be able to articulate the message in such a way that they don't seem hostile. And so I think sometimes that's been a failing of some libertarians, that they, we're gonna be so libertarian that nobody questions that we're libertarian.
Yeah, they're more interested
Yeah.
in virtue signaling the libertarians than reaching out to people who, actually
Right.
vote.
And honestly, we don't win until we can convince some other people to vote for us, both Republicans and Democrats and independents. We have to find somebody besides just the registered libertarians, because there's not enough of us to win anything, and it's certainly not any partisan offices. So, I mean, I think that's important. Beyond that, I'm not that picky. I mean, I don't care if it's a male or a female, young or old. Although it'd be nice, given the candidates that we appear to have, from the two major parties, that are well into their 70s. The president, and it would be nice to have some sort of a contrast to that. I don't know who that person is.
Somebody who is not in the at-risk category right now.
Exactly. So I don't know. I don't know exactly who we find. That's my ideal. I seldom get my ideal anything, and so I'm willing to settle for something less. But
Well, this is the conundrum libertarians always have. We always have the ideal candidate in mind,
mhm.
and then we get what we get from the field. That ideal candidate doesn't seem to want to show himself very often.
Right. Well, and in reality, my ideal is probably not your ideal. And so, we all have our own ideals. And so what we got to do is we've got to figure out who the best, the person who can make the most of us the most happy. It's sort of like a ranked choice voting kind of thing. You start ranking people, and whoever gets it can be the most satisfactory to the most people is the person that you get. I kind of like that concept. But yeah, I don't know who it is. I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got plenty of people to choose from right now. Unfortunately, nobody outside the Libertarian Party knows who any of these people are, except for maybe Lincoln Chafee. And I think he's going the Joe Biden route, quite frankly. He doesn't know who he is or where he is.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of it.
I think that's, I mean, I haven't met Governor Chafee. From everything I've heard, he's a really nice guy. But
I'm sure he is.
I think that there's, and I don't know if he's my, I don't know that he is my, my top choice. And I don't think he's doesn't look like from anybody's, any of the the straw polls that he's really anybody's top choice, or not very many people's top choice. But who that person is, I don't know. I mean, honestly, aside from him, we don't have anybody in the race right now who I think reaches out beyond a pretty narrow libertarian base, or I don't see that happening yet. So
Mark Whitney will tell you he does. I don't know how much I believe him.
Whitney?
Yeah, he'll tell you he does. I don't know how much I believe him though.
Yeah, I you know, I had a conversation with him, I don't know, right after he announced, and you know, he sounds great. I think that I honestly don't think, and maybe it's because I'm old, you know, but I'm not sure that his style appeals to a broader, um, electorate. I don't think that, you know, although we got Trump, so I don't, you know, I should probably just give up, you know, trying to.
I think Whitney is trying to play the Trump game, and I think we already have a Trump. So people who like that attitude probably just stick with him.
I'm not
I
sure
could be wrong. I'm
anybody.
not a political scientist. I could be wrong about this.
I'm not sure anybody can play the Trump game the way that Trump has played the Trump game, and I think it falls flat with anybody else. I mean, you know, Trump had the experience of, you know, however many years on that reality show, and you know, this kind of, you know, this kind of public persona. I don't think, and I may be wrong, I don't know that Mark Whitney has that sort of, you know, vast, you know, this vast recognition. I mean, I don't think most people really know who he is. You know, certainly not the way they did Donald Trump.
No, he'll just tell you that he'll keep the lights on to keep banging or whatever the heck his catchphrase is. So, where do you see the Pragmatist Caucus's place in the Libertarian Party, and where and how it can help improve the party?
Well, I mean, I think that the Pragmatist Caucus provides sort of a moderate. I hate to say moderating because that's always a negative term when you start talking to libertarians, but I mean, I think that temperamentally they take it, just because of the approach that they take. It's less about the specific philosophy and looking for perfection, and it's more about looking for good candidates and helping to provide those candidates with, you know, with a means of growing their appeal. You know, I think that it takes all kinds in the party. I think it's a good thing to have the radicals and even the audacious folks. I think it's fine. Yeah, okay. But I think there's a place for everybody, and I think that
I agree with that. I just think the place for them is outside the building, in the smoker's corner, smoking weed where no one can see them.
And I think that's where, you know, the pragmatists can be, you know, the ones that are standing in front of the camera talking to the press, you know, and you know, not that there aren't others who can do that, but I mean, I think that kind of attitude, you know, the people who get in a suit, who will stand up and talk and not act like, you know, like they're teenagers or whatever. You know, I mean, I think that there's there's a place for that, and I understand that in most parties, you know, you ever watch a Republican or a Democratic convention? I mean, there's plenty
of fools there too.
Yeah, there's plenty of silliness there. You know, the question is, are those the people who are outside of the convention? Are those going to be the people that everybody triggers on? And probably not, because they still have their the party leadership, and you know, you have this paradigm where everybody's a Republican or Democrat, or most people are Republicans or Democrats, and those are the respectable people. We're fighting from behind that way. I think we need to be able to really show that we can be respectable, you know, as libertarians. And you know, I know lots of very respectable libertarians. I know lots of people, you know, I love my time with my libertarian friends, but I think we need to think about how we present ourselves to others, you know, outside of our own little circle.
So Steve Sanderson wants to know what your thoughts on Jacob Hornberger are.
Well, for one thing, I think that he's a really nice guy. I met him at the Nebraska convention. I think he's very well spoken. I think that he is, he kind of fits, unfortunately, into the, he's 70 or 71 years old, which is young compared to, Trump and Biden and Sanders and that bunch. But he unfortunately still hits that kind of, senior citizen kind of atmosphere, but that's okay. I mean, I'm 57, so I'm approaching that, I guess, more rapidly than I want to think about. But he is I think he's a very principled fellow. There are certain libertarians out there who still bear him some ill will from 2000. 2000,
20,
I don't know, whenever
20
it
years
was,
ago.
it was before I was a libertarian, probably before you were out of high school. And
well before.
yeah,
2001, I was like 12, I
yeah,
think.
see, and I mean, there was this battle with he and Harry Brown, and right, that's yeah, and so I think that there's probably something, there's some people out there who still have some concerns about that. It looks to me like he's, the one to beat at this point. Now,
Yeah, he's definitely the front runner.
and I
If
don't
all
think,
the exit
yeah.
polls to be believed.
Yeah, I mean, if those, to the extent that we can believe the straw polls,
Yeah.
but I do think that, I think that there, all sorts of things could happen between now and, whenever we might have a convention, scheduled for the end of May. But
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because that seems to be the big new topic in libertarian circles. What is going to happen with the Libertarian National Convention? Because this coronavirus thing, it's going on. It's a real. A lot of people want to sweep it under the rug and pretend that it's no big deal. But here's the thing about it. Every time I listen to an expert talk about it, they're telling me it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Every time I see someone telling me it's not a big deal, there's some rando on the internet that doesn't know jack shit about anything. Yeah. So I'm going to believe, for the sake of caution, if nothing else, that they might know what they're talking about. Right. So if this is still going on in a couple months when the convention is supposed to be held, do you think that there's going to be a convention? And if not, do you think the LNC is going to be able to have a contingency plan in place so we can still nominate the candidate?
That's the one thing we have to do, right? We have to nominate a candidate, and I guess we have to elect. I mean, in theory, we have to elect the national committee, the national officers, and so forth. I am told that that the rules don't allow for remote meetings. However,
libertarians, screw the rules.
Well, I mean, I understand that the Libertarian National Committee is meeting on the 26th or something like that, in an emergency session, having an emergency meeting basically to talk about what kind of contingencies they might be able to develop for this. And I think that's a reasonable thing for them to do, because when you stop and think about it, here in Nebraska, what's our governor talking about? I mean, this is March 16th, right? What's our governor talking about in terms of schools? I mean, 6 to 8 weeks, indefinite.
Here, it's indefinite now.
Yeah. We got
they're
a call.
reassessing every 4 weeks.
Yeah, we got a call from our schools today that said that school, this is kind of funny, they had Monday and Tuesday off, today and tomorrow off, and they're supposed to go back on Wednesday because that's important apparently for them to clean out their lockers and get all of their is my thinking, and
There's
get
probably
all of,
some kids leaving food in their lockers, and they don't want to go into rats,
and to find out what the teachers have in store for them, because a lot of our high school students especially are one-to-one with netbooks. So I suppose what they're going to do is send them home with netbooks so that they can do some things online. But this becomes, if we're still 6 or 7 or 8 weeks from now, to the point where there's no school going on, and in 8 weeks there would be no school going on in Nebraska, in our part of Nebraska anyhow. then how do you justify, having a national convention that's going to bring together, I don't know, thousands of people, probably from around the country. Now, it's not just us that has this problem. The Republicans and the Democrats have this same problem this year, but theirs are a little bit later in the summer, and so maybe we get past it. My understanding is that Austin already has imposed some limits on how big of groups you can get together, and while you might have a situation where you have, where the danger seems to have passed or leveled off. They dropped precipitously down to, I think it's 50 people in Austin right now or something like that you can have in one place. We've dropped it down to 10 in Nebraska. I don't think there's going to be a day when one day they're going to say, oh, Shazam, it's all gone. So, okay, we can have 20,000 people in this room. I think what's going to happen is that they will ramp back up and say, okay, we've been at 20 people or 10 people or 50 people. We're going to increase it to 250, and we're going to see whether or not we have any new outbreaks. So we're going to do that for a couple of weeks. And so I mean that's the way I would do it if I was trying to prevent a second wave coming along. So I just can't imagine that if Austin, Texas is saying, we aren't going to let any groups have more than, I don't know what the magic number is, 250 or 150 or whatever it is right now, that we aren't going to let them have more than that many. I can't imagine that magically overnight in the middle of, May, they're going to say, okay, it's okay for you to bring 1,500 people here. I just have trouble imagining how that's going to work. So I don't know.
I can't imagine it either. And I messaged members of the LNC asking if they had a contingency plan because I didn't think they would, and my fear was confirmed. I hope they come up with something because I don't see. First of all, I don't see for legal reasons this being allowed to go forward. I think that the big groups like this aren't going to be allowed in May. That's I don't think that's going to be a thing. I don't think the venue is going to want a whole bunch of people coming in and having that. Well, and I don't think it would if the coronavirus is still a big pandemic. I don't think I think for being a responsible party, we should voluntarily choose not to have it, even if we are allowed to. Well, because here's the thing: you're flying in people from every state in the union, right? Exactly. The cream of the Libertarian Party, all our volunteers, a lot of our candidates, everybody that's just going to see it, the cream of the party, everyone with time, motivation, and money to be there. And then what are they going to do? They're going to come. It takes only one to infect the whole room. Then what happens? They go back to their states.
Exactly.
They go back to their parties. And now the whole Libertarian Party is sick with this thing right before an election.
Well, and it's not just the Libertarian Party, but it's all the people that they come into. I mean, from a social, kind of a moral compass standpoint. I mean, you have a little bit of I would have a problem with going out there. My husband is a physician, and we don't know that he's seen anybody yet. We don't know if he will have seen anybody. But I told the folks, and I was supposed to go out to the Colorado convention here in a couple of weeks, and I said, yeah, I'm not coming. It's not because I'm necessarily scared for myself, but I don't want to take anything out to them. The potential that I would take anything out to them. My husband was going to go with me, and he wouldn't want to take anything out to them. But the other piece of it is that you don't want to go someplace and then get stuck. I mean, what happens if you go out? If I go out to Colorado and they decide, oh wait, we're going to have a quarantine around this city, and you can't leave. I mean, I don't want to get stuck here. Just to get stuck there. So I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we need to think about from the standpoint of the best suggestion I've seen. I think is from Joseph Howe. I don't know if you know him, but he's from Iowa. The best suggestion I've seen is that the LNC, the LNC determines where the meeting will be. Right. Well, so have 50 different meetings, or have regional meetings. I mean, you could subdivide the group up and then you just do it digitally. You know, I mean, if you can't, the argument is that you can't do a convention digitally. Well, you know, these are extraordinary circumstances. Do it digitally, and have a very abbreviated agenda. You nominate your president, your vice president, and you elect your officers. And that's about all you can do. I don't know
and
if you want
then you adjourn, and
exactly.
all
Yeah.
the nonsense that goes
Yeah.
on in these conventions just doesn't happen.
Well, and you know, I mean, conventions are fun places to be, but you know, it would be significantly less fun if you know that people are getting sick or could get sick around you, that you could be taking it back to your family, that sort of thing. You mean, and the conventions are fun in large part because, you know, you're around people. Well, you're supposed to maintain this 6-foot distance. That's going to be kind of tough to do around in a convention. So I don't know. It is a complicated problem, and I wouldn't want to be on the LNC trying to decide it. But I do think that it's time for everybody to try to think outside the box a little bit, and maybe, you know, try to find, you know, this is an emergency situation. This never happen again, we hope, and so you figure out a way to get through it this time.
I see. There are a lot of people on the LNC who I think very highly of, and I think that if they can put something together, that can work.
Right.
And here's the thing: they don't have to call off the convention right now. What they need right now is a contingency plan and a trigger date. Right? If things aren't better by this date, this is what we'll do. Right?
And
that's what they really need.
And one of their problems, I think, is that they are really in a bind because they've got they've got this, you know, this financial obligation to the hotel. That said, you know, the hotel is going to figure out that, okay, we can't be there. You know, if there are, you know, there's got to be a way to get out. So you know, if the city of Austin is saying you can't have gatherings of more than 50 people, then the hotel really can't hold the Libertarian Party, you know, responsible for that.
No, I would hope not. I would hope that having a lawyer as chair of the party, we could do something to prevent having to pay out of the nose for this. All right, so we're getting over our allotted time for tonight.
Okay.
So before we say goodbye, why don't you tell us, if people want to get involved in the Pragmatist Caucus, what they'd have to do that?
It's really easy. I mean, they've got lots of places on Facebook that you can get to. That if you also go to lpcaucus.org, that's their homepage, and you can join. You can join just to get emails. You can throw them a little bit of money if you want to. We're always happy to take a little bit of money just to help us with printing and things like that. We haven't done a whole lot, I don't believe, in terms of expenditures, but we're always trying to update the website and make it a little more useful for those who might check in.
All right, thank you so much for coming on the show, Laura.
Absolutely.
Hope to talk to you again sometime soon. Hopefully after this all blows over.
That'd be great. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching the show. Remember, the website is think-liberty.com. Every Monday night, we have an interview. Every Tuesday night, Token and Hobbs. So listen in tomorrow. It's going to be good. Good night, everybody.